Welcome back on The Leaders Who Care. Today we celebrate 133rd episode, and we have the privilege to welcome a leader who is an international coach who helps founders and scale-ups to pitch well and secure their funding. We have David Beckett today, who actually has trained over 2,000 startups and scale-ups and win over 450 million of investments. He's also trained more than 33,000 professionals at companies such as Booking.com, Tommy Hilfiger, PwC, Netflix in more than 29 countries, as well as have more than 30 TEDx speaking events. David, you're the creator of the Pitch Canvas and the author of the book Pitch to Win and the Blue Moon Pitch. So there were a lot of pitching. And first of all, welcome on The Leaders Who Care. As you may know, and for the audience, we're on a mission to bring some of the most caring leaders from every corner of the world to share their success and what is the role of care, how did they make it, and why they do what they do. So we're here to share your success with the audience, and thank you for making the time. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Marian. I'm very happy to be here.
David, you have an impressive success story, and this is what we're really deeply interested in, because success matters. Everybody looks at your fruits, but for us in The Leaders Who Care, what also matters is how you get there. In other words, what is the journey, and what are the values that you share? Maybe starting with you a little bit. If I ask you how did you get there, I'm sure it's a long story, but tell us a little bit more about your own journey and why do you do what you do?
Sure. So I think my professional life is broken into two chapters. And the first chapter was a corporate life. I worked at Canon, the camera company, for 16 years, actually, in 3 different countries, and had lots of different roles. So there was that big corporate life. And then there's been this last 11 years working with entrepreneurs and startups. And actually, there's a bit of a link between the two. When I was working at Canon, I was really focused on a lot of things, but especially presentation. I was really interested in how presentation impacted people's careers. And the other thing was I was very focused on coaching, on managing people. And my approach as a manager was, I think you can take managing in 2 different ways. You can think, well, we've got these results that we need to get, and we've got this bunch of people who can help us get there. So how do I get these people to get these results? And I took the other way, which was more, okay, we've got a group of people, and if we work together well as a team, if we have the best team in Canon, then we'll reach our results. And that was my approach. So I was always focused on how do you build a team? And then how do you help them show what they're capable of, which was the presentation part. And my job moved to England in 2009. And that was an opportunity for me to take a step back and reassess, what do I care about? What do I want to do? And I decided to go for something that I was passionate about, and that was coaching and presentation. But the third part of that was I got connected with the Startup Accelerator, and I saw a different type of presentation, a pitch that takes you straight into the story right from the very beginning. And I found that completely exciting. I thought, this is what I want to be part of. So it sort of created a triangle connecting what was going to be my future and then 2 elements of my past professional career. But personally, I'm living here in Amsterdam, or just outside of Amsterdam. Came here 26 years ago, originally from England. Those passions of coaching, presenting, helping people shine has really been at the fore of everything I've done actually in work.
Thank you for sharing that wonderful journey that you have had so far. And when you talk about your passion of building a team, something that I'm also very passionate. We all know, and we've seen many great examples, that behind every great company there's a great team. If we can dissect that a little bit and just talk about just that notion of how do you look at a team, because you have a passion for coaching, especially how do you build a great team without necessarily always having the superstars because it's not always you have the ability or
no.
actually have them. It's wonderful to have, even when you have some five superstars, and they may not work well together. So it's really
Mm.
that coach element that I'm really interested of what makes a good to great team.
Yeah. So I think when I was a manager in Canon, I had a couple of tools that I used to use, a couple that I learned and a couple that I just developed for myself. The one for myself was, have you got 5 minutes? And this, when I started doing this with people, they initially are really nervous. When I got a new job in Canon, I would go to my colleagues, my new teammates, and after a week I'd say, "Hey, have you got 5 minutes?" And they would think, "What have I done wrong?" And my approach with "Have you got 5 minutes?" was, I would say to them, I can't follow everything that you're doing. You're working, 8 hours a day or longer. I'm also working 8 hours, but there's a whole bunch of us here. So I can't follow everything that everybody's doing at every moment. So let's just update. What are you working on? What's troubling you? What's succeeding? What do you need help with? And it was a talk with no goal. It was just to show, firstly, that I'm genuinely interested. I want to know what's going on, what's troubling them, or what's going well, and of course to be there if they need help. And after a couple of rounds of this, it started to be really popular. And of course, the 5 minutes ended up being an hour. So I would plan that. But it turned out to be pretty helpful. So that was one of the first things, was just to build the trust with the person by being genuinely interested. I think the other thing was to help people know what everybody in the team was doing. And it seems like a very basic thing, but there was some pretty shocking research about Canon, and I don't think Canon was the only company back in the 2000s, where they asked people, what's the main purpose of your job? Number one purpose. And more than 50% of people couldn't explain. And I think that's not uncommon in business today. And so I would make sure that we always had this one page where you could see each person's role, the basic headlines of what they were doing, and where the connections were. And then I would just always go through that, always keep making sure that different people who are working on different things would know what other people were doing, so that you didn't end up doing something that counteracted what they did, and that you basically had the same goals, that you were going for the same things. And what that resulted in is you didn't need everybody to like each other. I mean, that would be the perfect outcome. A lot of the time we did, but people are different characters. But at least you all know what you're doing. You know what the other person's doing. You know what you're working towards. And I just saw myself as these are the gears and I'm the oil in between. My job is to just keep everything moving. And when there's friction, reduce the friction. When there's something to be positive about, elevate the positivity, and keep doing the 5 minutes. How can I help? What's going on? How are you doing? And as I say, that first, it always fascinated me, that first, like, whoa, what have I done? But once you've done it 2 or 3 times, people say, oh, great. Yeah, come and let me tell you. Oh, this is happening. That's happening. And it's amazing how such a simple thing really made a difference in the communication with my colleagues.
That's wonderful. I really, this can go such a long way, and it sounds quite simple and very easily deployable. And often, if it's done consistently, and you're right, improves massively the communication. Because the role of the leader, of course, you're right, to use in the best possible way the resources they have by recognizing what they're good at and what they're not, and put together a team that ideally prevents frictions or preempt that, and elevates really the performance and spirit of the team, which is really important. You mentioned something that in the team you put like a headline of what the purposes of the role is, and what are the main topics of working, because often people don't know what others are working. How did you make sure that everyone else knew? Were you centralizing all this knowledge of the 5 minutes with you, or did you have some town halls, or what were the strategies to spread the awareness and people know of each other's work?
Well, I had 2 basic different levels. One was that I was mostly working with teams of like 8 to 10 people. And then I had a
Okay.
period where I was a country director for 4 countries, Poland, Hungary, Czech, and Slovakia. And there we had people in lots of different locations. Now we're talking just before things like Skype and then, of course, Zoom and Teams started becoming prevalent. So honestly, in those days, I was just on the road. I was just traveling in between these 4 locations, and Vienna, where our main
Yeah.
office was, and Amsterdam, where the European head office was. So the tools for the bigger team were pretty tricky. So I did a lot of personal communication and getting teams together. People did travel between each other. So if you had the marketing team, you would get the marketing team to get together every couple of months. And that might be spread across different countries, but we'd get people in one place. Today, you would probably do that. In fact, almost certainly do it in a virtual way. But I still believe that those times when we got people together really had big, big impact. So I'm a firm believer in a mixture, be practical, online stuff, but get people physically together from time to time. I think in the smaller team, in the team up to 8 or 10 people, it was simply to have one very simple thing that you could print. And that's not a 5-page document, but a 1-pager, which just gave you a simple overview so that everybody knew what everybody was doing. And it was the most simple but most effective tool I've come across, because you can have job descriptions and the details behind it. But if you think, I'm working day to day, where do I interface with somebody else in the team? Where might be the moments where I step into their territory? And is that good or bad? Or do we need to communicate about that? Just having that knowledge, that overview, turned out to be enough, actually. And it worked really well. So something as simple as that. Now, I think there's a lot of tools out there which can make, let's say, the more functional, the next level and deeper levels. A lot of project management tools and Scrum tools and so on. These are all valid. But I think it's good to have one simple thing that everybody can see in one glance on one page. This is basically what I'm doing. This is basically what these other people are doing. And this is basically where we're going. And that really seemed to help everybody to get a picture of what their role in the team was. And it helped me to have the overview as well as a manager.
And now, just going down to the team itself, that's a great way to start of clarity. I think the team often and people want to know what success looks like, what my role is, where we are heading. These are fundamentals and basics. Then how do you really enhance, so as a coach, or build high performing team that is actually working well with each other, and it has each other's back?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of classic things which are very true cliches, and that is hiring for character rather than specific skills. And there is one good example. A person I hired, I really needed somebody who was organized. We had in those days we had printed instruction manuals. It was a nightmare to do things in 22 different languages, a lot of different products, huge great books and so on. There was such a coordination job. And I used to meet with friends, with a group of friends from time to time. We would go for dim sum in a Chinese restaurant. There was a sister of a friend of mine who used to come along. I didn't really know her that well, but there was one time we were all at the end of the meal, and there were 12 of us around the table, and somebody said, okay, here's the bill. And then suddenly there was money. I think I paid this much, and somebody else, I think I paid this much. And then Evelyn said, hang on, take your money back. Okay, so here's the thing. You need to pay this, you need to pay this, you need to do this, and then we're all good. Big smile on the face at the end, and we all just did what she did because we trusted her. And I thought, that is what I really need. I really need that person right now in my team. And I can honestly say that was the reason I brought her in for interview. And she knew nothing about instruction manuals or fax machines. Actually, I was working in the fax department, such a very non-exciting product. But She didn't know anything about these products, about the task of creating instruction manuals, but she had this knack of organizing stuff, of connecting with people. People trusted her. So I thought, well, she'll work out the rest of it. And she did. I think she's still working at Canon now. And that was 20 years ago. And it was the start of a career for her. But she was a great person to have in your team. I think if we'd gone for somebody who had purely the technical skills, I might have made a wrong decision. So that's been it is a cliche, but it's a very true cliche, hiring for character and thinking, where does somebody fit in? What kind of qualities do they have that will help for this task and will enhance the team as well?
Well, I will relate this to because you work with a lot of founders. I understand helping them pitch. So first one
Yes.
is helping them with their pitch. Is it sound? How do you do that? And then we'll talk about once the pitch is successful, to expand bigger on how they scale and what role teams play with it. But I can understand why you're so effective with presentation, right? It's so starting with what makes a great pitch versus a mediocre or good pitch. It would be wonderful to even discuss with you if we're to pitch now, what does that look like? How do we attract the interest, of an investor?
Sure. Well, my mantra for coaching, and I've been doing this 11 years, I will give my 1149th workshop this afternoon. It's a passion of mine. I could do it 10,000 times. I love it every time. And I think it comes down to a couple of big things. Firstly, audience and objective. I'm very focused on people getting clear on who's the audience and what do they care about, and what's the objective. What action would I like these people to take as a result of the pitch? And I've found that what most people do is they open up PowerPoint, start typing and thinking, I need to get the slides done. But actually, the slides are a bit of a secondary part of the pitch. They're important because they add value, but they're not the story itself. What matters is to come up with which bits of the story that I want to tell are relevant for these people. And then based on that, what would be the thing that I want them to do? What action do I want them to take? Now, that's a first step. And I think secondly, the really big thing is talking about what problem you solve rather than what you've created. What most people do is they talk about, here's what I do, or here's our product. So here's our product. Here's some more of our product. Here's a bit more information about our product. Any questions? And what I've found is a better way to approach things is, here's this massive problem that affects people every day. They're losing money, they're losing time, wasting energy, there's material wastage, you name it. And you quantify how big that problem, it's costing this much time, or there's this much extra CO2 created, or whatever the measure of what's going wrong right now is. Then we describe very briefly, so here's what we do, and as a result, here's this improvement. Less CO2, more productivity, more lower cost, or whatever the result is of what it is that we do. And that has value because we've already given an anchor of what's the problem today. And I think once people get that, everything else changes, because a pitch becomes good once you get clear on the problem that you're solving. Then there's one additional thing, and there's lots of things, I can talk about this all day, but I think to tune into the theme of your topics, that word care really matters, because there is a difference between people who are very good at executing on an idea, and that can be successful. But the X factor is really, are you genuinely committed? And that's what investors, and I think customers as well, are looking to feel. Do you genuinely want to solve this problem? And if the idea is, well, we created something that we think we can make some cash out of, people can smell it, they can feel it. And whereas the entrepreneurs, where you can feel that they're committed to the purpose of what they're doing, and I don't mean always some kind of grand purpose. It doesn't always have to be some grand purpose, but just simply being genuinely committed, genuinely enthusiastic about what they do. That is the gold dust of the pitch. Now, without getting the basics right, being clear on who the audience is, making it relevant for them, having a clear objective, a final call to action, focusing on the pain, and then having a good structure that fits within the time. That's really the basis. That's the solid stuff. But the angel dust is the passion for what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think that can make all the difference.
Wow. And how do you sense that when somebody's, because a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs get into a business, may sometimes or often for the wrong reason, not always for the commitment and the resilience they have and the passion to solve that problem. How do you smell whether somebody's just for the exit? Because that's kind of becoming a little bit of a culture, and say, I want to be a unicorn,
Yeah,
but then what the unicorn means, it may not make any profit, and it's just to reach a status that is somebody invested X amount of money that gives you a valuation of $1 billion plus. But is it sustainable? A lot of unicorns go out of business very often afterwards, and so it's
yeah.
really it could be a great idea, great potential, but how do you assess when somebody's in it for the exit of 3 to 5 years just to make their own money, or really commit and have the resilience to also stay there?
Sure. Well, one thing I think to be a bit realistic about is it's not so bad to be only looking at the exit. It's not my personal preference, but in the end, an investor, if you're looking to pitch to raise money and have a big successful company, an investor will invest in people who are driven to deliver returns. Actually, their job is to get a 10x return, and that's a whole topic in itself. But there's a limitation on that. And I heard a really good thing at an event a couple of days ago where somebody said, if you want to become a billionaire, help 1 billion people. If you want to be a millionaire, help 1 million people. And that is a great way to measure it. Are you genuinely interested in helping the people that you're looking to help? Are you genuinely interested in solving the problem that you're looking to solve? Now, it's not all about investors. I think it's especially about delivering something for customers. That's the number one, number two, number 20 thing that matters, the top things. But I think customers can feel when a company is, genuinely committed. And excuse me, I think we pick up information about the things we buy in lots of different ways now. We don't just look at the product. We sometimes look at the people behind it. That's what social media has given us access to. We might look at the founder, might be inspired by the people who lead that company. So I think we as customers can feel a little bit whether a company is the real deal. But coming back to the entrepreneur, if you get a very good, very solid story of here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the market size, here's what's unique, here's our traction, this is what we're raising, it can be all solid, but it leaves you a bit cold. You don't feel anything. And I think 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, that will, at some stage in the journey, it will fall over, because something will happen that gets really difficult. And when things are really difficult, if you're not convinced about your purpose, you stop. And that's really why investors are interested in passion, why they want the founder to be committed to the purpose of their business, because it's de-risking. Very simply, if you're really genuinely committed, you just don't give up. If you want this to be solved, you don't give up. And that's what investors are looking for. And in a way, it's what we want our products to do, or the services that we buy. We want people who are determined to either help us or keep things going when things are difficult. We respect that. We feel that. So I think there's a lot of value in people getting to grips with why are they doing things. And, it might not be that you start a company with some grand passion. It might almost evolve as you evolve your company. But normally there's a reason why you chose to do this and not something else. So then getting to grips with that and communicating that can be really powerful, I think.
Wonderful. And when you talk about the opposite side of it, what are the biggest mistakes people make when they pitch?
I think number one is just talking about what they do, so telling about product. Second is, again, not having anything personal in the pitch, that it's all rational, and not respecting the time. But quite often, entrepreneurs are often in the situation where they have to tell in 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and I drill people on how to keep within the time, because the fact is, if somebody says 5 minutes, they really mean it. And quite often you will have a hard stop. So if you plan to finish kind of within 5 minutes, but it'll probably be okay if it's 6, that's going to go wrong. You won't finish the pitch. And that's really a pity. So I think respecting the time, even when the clock isn't ticking, trying to keep things short, because everybody's busy. When you go to a customer, they're not necessarily looking for a 20-minute pitch. They want a 3 to 5 minute summary and then ask some questions and get some answers. So I think, focusing not enough on the problem and too much on the solution, not having themselves in the pitch, something about the emotion, and not respecting the time are 3 of the biggest things that can go wrong.
Just makes me think that this is so valuable and often could be easily forgotten, because it's common sense and we can learn from a lot of best practices. But you're right. Sometimes somebody said to me, it's much more difficult to summarize things than to talk for longer. Someone said
Yes.
I can talk for hours. It's easier for me than if you ask me to do it for 3 minutes. Because you have like conflicting priority. What do I say? What I don't say? What would capture the what would be really interesting is just to do a small role play or pitch on its own. I mean, looking at leaders who care, looking at what we do and sharing the story earlier. If I am to approach, let's say, a very senior leader around the world, could be CEO, could be a family office, whatever, and talking about the leaders who care. Imagine you're in my shoes and I'm delivering a pitch for less than 3 minutes, even just a brief conversation.
Sure.
What would make them interested? What would be the things that you'd highlight, just as a demonstration to the audience that we're using leaders who care because we're deeply passionate about it and wanted to spread this care culture in more people to be successful, and while respecting others, while taking of others, and really therefore making a positive impact on everyone's lives. But it's if it was you pitching it to a potential leader that is a high flyer or
Sure.
at the very top of his or her game, what would be your pitch for it, for example? Just to put you on a little spot here.
Sure. I have an idea about this. So I think there's 2 different types of pitches. One is to customers and one is to investors. So an investor pitch is a bit of a different thing. You talk about, for example, the market size. You give a picture of what a typical customer is experiencing and the problems that they face. Now, bringing to a customer a problem that they face is a pretty delicate thing. It can be sensitive. So let me give you an example. If somebody said to me, David, you're a pitch coach and you've got a problem, my first reaction would be like, I don't have any problems. I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. What do you mean I've got problems? But if somebody said to me, David, we speak to pitch coaches quite often. I've spoken to a dozen in the last month. And what they're really struggling with today is, now I'm immediately interested because they've painted a picture. They've said, I talk to people like you every day. And what I've learned that they're struggling with is, and my first reaction is, oh, really? What are they struggling with? Maybe I have the same struggles and perhaps you've got a solution. Or maybe I don't and I can feel good about myself. So let's apply that to your situation. Just imagine I know I'm absolutely certain you've had success in business. So I take an example of it just really going wrong.
Yeah.
If you go into a big CEO of a big company and say, yeah, there's really not enough care in your company. We've got a way of making that different. Of course, the reaction is very defensive.
Defensive.
And I
Yeah.
think that's the case anytime we bring a problem to a customer. The natural first reaction is, what you're saying is I'm not doing my job well.
Mm.
And so I think the trick is to paint a picture of an organization or a company that's like them, who might be struggling with certain things that they're struggling with as well. So if you know that, for example, there's been some research about the way their company is operating, you know that let's call it the concept of care is not a common thing in the organization. You could go to that company, and the trick is to paint a picture of a company that they might recognize. So, for example, if it's a multinational company, talking about how you do things in a startup doesn't help. Equally, if you're trying to pitch to a startup, telling about how I did work with Tommy Hilfiger, that doesn't work either. So let's just say it's a multinational company. You say, great to meet you. So we've been working with quite a few multinational companies, and you might mention, such as this one and this one, companies that they might see themselves as. And what we found they're really struggling with is this and this and maybe this. And the result of that is what's happening is people are leaving, or they find their churn is happening like this, or this is happening. So what we've been doing with those companies is, and then you give a very short description of what you do, really like the shortest. And as a result of what we do, they get this reduction in churn, this improvement in employee satisfaction. And then you can move into, shall I walk you through how we've done that for those other customers? Now, this is a very different way of describing the problem and the pain that those customers are facing. You're painting a picture that they see themselves in without saying, you have this problem. But very clearly, that's the dynamic, but there's no friction. You're basically creating a third point for the two of you to take a look at, and creating a story about how you help them solve their problems. And of course, the person on the other table, they want the same value. They want to improve because they know they've got bigger churn or low employee satisfaction or whatever it is. So this would be my way. Now, that what I've just described could literally be 9 to 12 sentences. It could be a really short introduction. It's really the first connection to say, I feel what's happening in this industry. I feel what's going on potentially for you. We've got a track record of dealing with this. Shall we walk you through it? And then you're in a much more easy way to get into the issue. Does that make sense, Marian?
Absolutely. Thank you. This is a great way to demonstrate how you could really attract the attention of a customer or investor or leader, depending on the situation, always tailored towards their my and very relevant to what you just said. Personally, what helps me a lot in my role and what I do and helping a lot of CEOs and leaders is I spend often days thinking about them and putting myself in their shoes, and I think of what problem could they be facing that I could solve.
Yeah.
And
What's their
that's
biggest challenge?
exactly, and I live and breathe that. It's just thinking of it. And then when I speak to a lot of leaders, I see a lot of correlations, a lot of best practices that one can take advantage of, and are looking at the company situation, looking at what they might be facing, thinking of, because probably on one end it may be a gift, on another may be a disadvantage, but I don't see people for who they are. I see them for who they could become. So I see the good in people, and I want to focus more on that. But I'm trying to also provide solution to a potential problem, and I very much relate to character, because
Yes.
it is, I found very often when you work with leaders at the highest level of multi-billion, 20, 30, 50, $100 billion dollar businesses, it's very rare that leaders will open up and say, I have a weakness of this, this, and this. or I have
Absolutely.
a problem of this kind. Sometimes they do, depending on the culture. Um, but um, my role and what I really care about is how can I take care of that leader? How can I
Mm,
really help them with potentially the challenges they might be facing and maybe cover their blind spots without necessarily telling me that they have that, but just to, like what you
exactly.
just described. Uh,
Yeah.
and if they open up in the future, that's a different story, but that takes trust, and that trust is one of the most valuable things you can have. But that's
Yeah.
earned over time, right? You need to deliver consistent results and genuinely care about them. And people sense when you're really interested. And I often found
Absolutely.
that if I give one advice like you just did earlier, is that whenever you have a customer or a relationship or a potential investor that may have been delayed, may have had a problem or issue with that concerns you or your pitch or affects you,
Hmm.
um, it's very important how you react in that moment. Are
Mm,
you gonna just say, "Oh, this is I prepared so much and didn't show up," or you say, "Of course, no problem." Just try to solve and react in a very positive, genuinely positive way, an accommodating way. And I always found that leaders remember that really, especially if
yeah.
you're there when because very often they may have a conflicting priorities, and
Yeah. Uh,
they just may not have the time.
yeah. There's actually a really good book. I'm a big football fan, and it's about penalties. One of the things that
Yeah.
and this guy called Ben Littleton, it's called, if I remember rightly, it's called 12 yards. Uh, uh, which in German, for example, it would be Elfmeter, because in England it's still the 12-yard spot. It's that's how far it is from for the penalty. And what he said is that there's a lot of, so he's analysed a lot. People say penalties is a lottery, but actually there's a lot of things that you can do. And one of the things that he found through a lot of research was, if you picture a penalty shootout, all the team are standing on the line and they've got arms linked or whatever. And if somebody misses, how they receive the person back into the community, it really makes a difference. So if the person walks back and everyone's sitting there going like this and holding their head in their hands, then that creates a feeling like, I'm if I screw up, I will be rejected. If I don't score, I will be rejected. Whereas if you walk back, the whole team embraces you. They take you back in. It doesn't matter. They support you. They care about you. They realize you're feeling terrible and they want to be there for you. That tells the next person who's taking a penalty, oh, if I miss, I'll be received back like that. And if I score, it's going to be great. So it reduces stress. So I think the reaction for when things go wrong, especially as a group or as individuals, I found that really fascinating. Um, and I always watch that when they have a shootout. There was a shootout the other day. What happens when they go back to the group? Because you can normally tell who's going to win the shootout dependent on that. And yeah, taking it back to business,
Wow.
when we mess up, when people miss, I remember very vividly, I made a mistake in my first year of working at Canon Europe, when I was a part of the team, not the manager. And it cost quite a lot of money. It was something like 60,000 euros, which in those days, we're talking 1998, a lot of money. And my boss, I was terrified of telling him. Finally, I sat down with Mr. Tomita and I said, I'm really sorry. I made this mistake. This happened. This is why it happened. I'm so sorry. And he said, it's okay. The most important thing about mistakes is to be clear about that they've happened, to try to understand why, and then do everything you can to avoid them happening again. And that was it. He didn't make me feel bad. He just told me a basic principle about how to deal with mistakes. Um, and I will never forget that. I always kept that in mind. So, yeah, I think how you receive people after they've made a mistake is so important.
To elaborate further, David, I also
Mm,
have seen and witnessed to your point. Um,
mm,
how does the leader react when there's a problem? If the leader reacted emotionally and shouted out and made you feel bad,
Mm,
that can kill innovations in a company, because people will
very
be
much.
afraid to take risk because of your first reaction when there's a problem. And everything that
Yeah.
when it comes down to independence, proactivity, innovation, will be passed on to you, because they'll be afraid to make a decision, because they may be afraid to fail. Therefore,
Yes.
because if they fail, they'll be feel really bad and they'll be shouted at. So therefore, they don't want to take that responsibility. And therefore, eventually, the leader will be snowed under with decisions and escalations, and that creates
Yeah.
I just painted like, and it takes a year, well, a lot of long time to repair or bounce back if you've made a mistake of this kind of reacted emotionally, because, but you can. And the message here is, you're right. Leadership is real test when you, how do you react when there's a real problem, big problem in an
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah. Definitely.
And the emotional response can be quite disruptive in a negative way, unless it's a positive emotion, in a way that, as much as it can be, rationally looking at things.
Yeah.
How can we support you overcome this? What do you need from me? As you just described earlier. So thank you for bringing this up. It is it has come up a few times. So
Yeah.
I
Maybe
agree.
just to share one
Yeah.
other thing that I learned. Um, because when I first was a manager, I think I was really good when things went well. I was always ready to give praise, give credit where it's due, and a lot of positive things. But when things went wrong, I had no tools of what to do.
Yeah.
It just wasn't in my character, so I didn't know what to do. And I had a training from a particular organization, and one of the things they trained was giving bad news. And I realized, oh, this is really the pinpoint of why I've got a weakness as a manager. So I became a manager. Then I went to become a member in a 9-person team, and then I became manager of that 9-person team. And the gap between the first experience and the second experience, I could almost pinpoint to this one specific thing: how to give bad news. And what they said was, they gave a little role play where you you had to tell somebody that they were going off the project, but you would do it in the wrong way. And the wrong way was to say, you would sit down with the person and say, "So, Jill, how's it going?" And Jill would say, "Oh, I've been working really hard. I mean, the project's gone a bit off the rails, but I've been working day and night the last week to try to bring it back. I really feel like I've got the people back on track. We're going for it now." And yeah, they're fully enthusiastic. And then you've got to tell them you're off the project. And either people don't make that decision, which can be a wrong decision, or they tell them and the person is completely lost. They're over the top lost, because they've just expressed how much energy they're putting in, and then they just get whacked across the head. And instead, what they said is, sit the person down and tell the bad news. Simple, straight, and clear. And you would sit down and say, "Jill, not the best news for you. I'm going to take you off the project." Boom. The emotions will come. They will still come, but it's a different scenario. They will let rip a little bit and so on. And the idea that was shared, and I found it really worked, was just to let the person talk. This is their moment when they want to get it off their chest, but you never know. They might be relieved. Maybe it's pride speaking rather than, "I genuinely want to stay on the project." And gradually the emotions drop. And then at a certain moment, you start discussing about next steps. And I found this really helpful. I found it really helpful. It helped me deal with quite difficult situations. And it always ended up much better than I expected, because mostly people know that something's gone wrong. It's pretty rare that you give people bad news and they're utterly shocked, that they have absolutely no idea that that's coming. It does happen, but it's 1 in 10, maybe less. 9 times out of 10, people know what's coming. And then you genuinely show, I'm interested in how you feel, but it's clear, there's clarity. it isn't going to change. That is a decision. And now what we're dealing with is the consequences of the decision rather than the debate of is that a good decision. I found it really helpful, and it gave a better connection. It never resulted in at least overt resentment. You never know, but at least it's felt like it never resulted in resentment.
It also reminds me of something else that
Yeah.
even when you send an email with when it's bad news or whether you want something, from somebody,
Mm.
it's always better to start with what you want or what's the problem than just
Mm.
start, I hope you well, everything is going. Then at the end, you just put, can you
Yeah.
donate X amount of money? Can you do this for me? And etc. Versus if
Yeah.
you say, listen, we're facing, we're in the middle of a situation. We would appreciate if you can support us in this and this.
Yeah.
I hope
Being
you're well and
transparent.
your family is doing well, and wish you a great rest of the week. I think it's just that philosophy of starting with the problem, addressing it first, can apply to many other ways of communicating with people. And
Yeah,
I
I think
think
so.
there's that sense of transparency and really respect. And I think often companies don't have courses that teach them in how to deal with difficult situations or deliver bad
Mm.
news or deal with conflict.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, very much so.
have you ever had a situation with conflict resolution? Let's say, do you train or help teams to resolve conflict? Literally, could be between two members or two divisions, whatever, maybe. Or
No, that's not something I'm really focused on. I'd certainly had that experience when I was working as a manager, um, but these days I really focus on the pitch, how to help them get clarity in their story. Um, but yeah, funnily enough, uh, that particular tool of just getting clarity on what the issues are as quickly as possible and not too much soft soaping it. I think that's one of the best ways to resolve conflict is to get the thing on the table so you can get to grips with it.
no, that's fantastic. Coming back to the pitch, how do you
Mm.
help and mentor those founders, leaders, scale ups to um, take care of themselves mentally, physically? Um, uh, is it just the pitch, or you help them out with the overall kind of resilience and their mental state?
Well, I would say the main focus of my work is on the pitch. Equally, the thing about talking about a pitch is you have to talk about the business,
Mm.
and inevitably you get into discussions with people about things that are not only about the pitch, or they're related to it, because ultimately the pitch is to take everything about the business, package it in a short version of what's going on, and then deliver that. So you have to get to grips with what's going on, and that's both the practical stuff and the emotional stuff. What is a founder going through? Um, I've had some pretty interesting and honestly shocking discussions with female founders when they talk about what they've faced with investors, the kind of commentary that they get. Uh, ridiculous things about why are you wearing a flowery dress today? Things like this, or getting told, I'm fed up with high voices of these women. These kind of things that people have actually have said out loud and in the face of some of the founders, some of the smartest people I've met. Unbelievable. And of course, my emotional reaction to that is this is insane. I want to react emotionally, but my job is to help them to reflect on that. I think, how do I make sure that doesn't happen? What do I need to put in my pitch so that I just get around this, that these kind of topics are brushed aside and we get to grips with what the issues are? And so I work on those kind of things. So in a way, my response to the emotional aspects that I come across in terms of resilience and keeping going is to help them find their story so that they can break through those barriers. If people are putting brick walls up in front of them, the task is get a sledgehammer, and a pitch is one of the ways to break down the barriers. It's only a piece of it's a part of the handle. There's other bits that make that sledgehammer, but a pitch can help because it clarifies your mind about where you're going, why you're doing it, and which elements of your business they have to pay attention to. So yeah, this is how I meet founders on that more emotional side.
David, what is the greatest pitch you've ever witnessed or listened to?
Mm-hmm. So probably I look at it a bit differently for most people, because what I look at is how far people come. Mm-hmm. And you will find, so you can find examples of great pitches and great talks and TEDx talks and so on. But for me, the pitch that lands is the one where somebody really struggled to tell their story and then they completely nailed it. And I have one guy from my history called Juan Zamora. He was the founder of a company called Signaturet. And I met him in the middle of a accelerator program called Startup Bootcamp. And he had real problems pitching his business. He was a Spanish guy and wasn't speaking much English when he was in Spain, but he came to Amsterdam, everything in English, and he had to catch up on that. And a couple of pitches that he'd made, which weren't expected, he had to tell about the business in 1 minute. He had to stop. He couldn't do it. And then the people in the organization of the accelerator were saying, you need to stop as CEO. You can't pitch. Somebody else needs to take it. But this was insane because this guy was a brilliant CEO. You could see his team. If Juan said, go this way, they say, okay, and off they went. They just followed everything. They were totally looking up to him as a person, and quite right too, because he's an amazing person. Really one of the best people you can possibly meet. Really human, down to earth, totally focused on the well-being of his team, but also on getting the job done. And so really like ideal entrepreneur with one weakness, couldn't pitch his business. So we got to work, and he didn't only work with me, he worked with a number of people. And over a 6-week period, he went from literally, I walked into the room and he had his head in his hands, to standing on stage as if it's his home. And within the next 3 years, he won pitch competitions and eventually exited his company. Now, I'm sure if somebody looked at that pitch, they would say, oh, it was pretty good. It was quite okay. But I see how far somebody's come and the work that somebody's put into it. That you can really smell from that person's pitch. And I admire people who also are very good at what they are pitching. Another guy I worked with, Rutger Teunissen, had a company called 24 Sessions that also exited. And when I met him, he was already one of the best in the program, out of 10 startups at pitching. But he said, I want to get it better. I want to make it better. I coached him a couple of years later. His team did a workshop for his team. He's already really good at pitching. And there he is in the team, working with the other members. And I said, hey, Rutger, I'm sure you're really busy. Great that you joined. He said, no, David, I can always learn. I always want to do this better. It's so important. So you can get the attitude from those founders who are totally committed to doing something really good. And I'm sure, that attitude to the pitch, you can see that reflects about their attitude about the whole business. If they're really focused on getting that right and they do the work, you can feel they probably do that all through their business. So, yeah, but especially Juan, I will always have a massive respect for that person, for the person he is, but that was reflected in the work that he did for the pitch.
Thank you, David. It's been absolutely great to have you today and talk about the conversation. Just a couple of last questions for you here. How do you take care of yourself to really be on top of your game and to help others? Because in order to show up for others, you need to really have something to give, which is obviously that value, and of course that comes with your well-being, with your health. What are the things that you do that recharges you, that gives you that strength, that desire, that passion to stay at that level?
Well, I think the first thing is actually the word from your podcast, and that's to genuinely care. You know, I'm really, really lucky, blessed, any of those words you can find, because I found something that I absolutely love doing every single day. And the biggest kick I can get is to hear that somebody shines in their pitch. You know, yesterday somebody sent me a message about how their pitch went in a competition. You know, so I think the first thing is, if you find something that you're truly passionate about, that will give you a load of energy. But there's other practical stuff. You know, when I started this business, I didn't have customers and we were running out of money very quickly. We nearly went bankrupt, me and my wife. And I worked like a madman, and that was not healthy. I wasn't paying attention to what I would eat. I wasn't doing any exercise. I was just working. And over the years, we've reset that balance where we've been trying to carve out more time for family. I would, for example, so quite often I would go to a shared working space and I would work through the evening 2 nights a week. Then we realized, hang on, we've got young kids. We need to eat with them. So I would stop 5:30, guaranteed every day, come home, we eat together. If I need to work longer, okay, but then I'll do that when they've gone to bed. And I still do that. So that time as a family is really precious. It takes a lot for us not to be there. Secondly, exercise. I'm exercising 3 times a week. That's been the case for quite some years now. And that definitely gives me energy. But I think, honestly, this year I have gone a little bit the other way, because over the years we've been gradually getting more and more work-life balance. But I do have some really big ambitions, especially with things like YouTube and coaching at scale. And I've reached a certain level, but I want to get more. I want to get my stuff to more people, because I've got 11 years of proving it works. Now I'm spending 1 hour every morning, getting up 1 hour early every morning, and 2 nights a week working in the evenings to create video and content. So at the moment, I'm sort of compromising that. But as soon as I see that would have any impact on coaching, I will stop that. Because number 1, number 2, number 3, make the person in front of me better at pitching, help them shine when they need to. That's my goal. So yeah, it's a constant tightrope, and you're constantly recalibrating, I think.
The final question, David, is if you had, let's say, the blessing or the power to change anything in the world, with no unlimited resources, unlimited power, what is one thing that you would do to make the world a better place, or a more caring world?
Yeah, I mean, if this had been 3 years ago or 5 years ago, I think I would say something different. But unfortunately, it would be very simply that anybody involved in any kind of war, whatever side, was able to see we're just human beings. And if we can have a bit more empathy and emotion for other people, we don't need to have some kind of a war to try to take something from somebody else. There are so many other ways. And I'm a big fan of Rutger Bregman. He wrote the book Humankind, and it came out a couple of years before the Russia-Ukraine war, and there was a lot of statistics about how the world is a better place than a long time, and I wonder how accurate those statistics would be now. But yeah, unlimited resources. Find any other way to resolve a conflict than a war. That would be it.
Lovely. David, thank you so much for being a leader who cares, helping so many people pitch better, take better care of them and yourself, and really making a difference to the world. Blessing goes to you, your family, your team, and your work. So thank you once again for being leaders who care, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Marian. It was a great conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.